Our dagger crown's looking pretty good so far, but the daggers aren't connected to each other. If we were to create this prop right now, it'd just be a series of daggers. As such, in this section, we're going to create a little bridge, or part that connects them together, to make them all one solid crown. In order to accomplish this, we're going to use the measure tool to measure the distances between the daggers, and then we're going to use the sketch tools we're familiar with by now, such as the polyline and the spline tool. Once we extrude it, we'll have to apply a couple of chamfers and fillets to it to make it look more ornate. After that, we just need to put it into position using the move tool, and then we'll use the circular pattern tool again to make 12 copies of it in the correct positions. Let's see how that's done then. Before I create this part that will span this gap, I need to know how large the gap is. To do this, I'll use the measure tool from the toolbar on the top. With the tool selected, I simply click on one handle, and then click on the other. The measure tool is now telling us that the blue line between the two handles is 24 millimeters long. This means the part I have to make must be larger than 24 millimeters. Well, I think I'll add another 11 millimeters onto it and make the part 35 millimeters long to make sure that the ends of this part end up in the handles. The design I'll be sketching will look something like a letter T with the top of it pointed. Let's begin sketching off to the side of our crown. I'll use the polyline to create a line that's about 35 millimeters long and another only 5 millimeters tall. This part will essentially be a 5 millimeter square bar going between the two dagger handles. I'll use another polyline to quickly make it symmetrical looking. Now I'll use the spline tool and add some interesting curves. It doesn't really matter how tall this part is either. We can always adjust it or chop it off at some later date. Since I'm planning on 3D printing it, I'll definitely end up chopping it off when I create a small base for the crown to rest on while it prints. I'll make this symmetrical looking with another spline, and remember that if you ever deselect your sketch while sketching, you must reselect it by highlighting on the sketch and clicking on it to let 123D Design know that you want to continue editing it. Let's add a point to the top of this, and then a hole in the middle. I'll do both using the polyline tool. Like I said, let me just add that little diamond hole here, once again with the polyline. Now I'll clean up the sketch a little bit with the trim tool. The trim tool is a nice tool located underneath the sketch tab that can be used to delete portions of a sketch. To use it, we select our sketch and then we click on the unwanted lines and curves to delete them. In this case, just these two lines. I'll use the extrude tool to just extrude this by 5 millimeters. And then let's add some chamfers to its edges to make it look a little more ornate. Also add some chamfers to this hole in the center. This part's now ready to be put in its place. I'll select the part, and then I'll grab the move tool, and we can maneuver the part around using this planar move just by grabbing one of these boxes. And then I'll pull it up, and we'll make some adjustments and angle it into place. This is a little bit of a tedious process, but it'll pay off once it's all together. I'll make sure, though, while doing this, that both of its ends end in the handles and don't protrude out of the bottom of the handles either. Once it's in place, I'll place a similar color as the hilt and the pommel using the material library. Now would be a good time also to shorten these pieces if you weren't planning on 3D printing this prop. Before I select the circular pattern tool, I'll make sure our sketches are visible again, so we have something to pattern this part about. With the sketches visible, I'll use the circular pattern tool to create 12 of them using the center line as our axis. Let me clean up this document by deleting the sketch we made off to the side by selecting it and then pushing delete on our keyboard. Then I'll hide the sketches so we can get a good look at our crown. At this point, the crown's pretty much finished. You could add other details if you want, but I think this looks great. In the next section, we'll export this model over to Mesh Mixer and prepare it for 3D printing.